there are regular people who go, but once you're in there, you are kind of caught up, and you maybe don't question. I think they said something really interesting where she used Mr. Barris, and I hope I'm getting his name correctly, so that people would not question her magic, right? Like, because usually it's magic doesn't exist, so they have to figure out ways to make the ordinary look like magic, where she had the exact opposite problem. She had to make what she did just, enough so that people could possibly think that, oh, this is how she did it, or this is how she did it, so that they don't, break the spell or whatever and question too much.
An engineer, so that people could say, oh, he must have figured out how to create.
Right. And I think there was something interesting they mentioned at one point, too, that none of her costumes had sleeves. So I thought that was a contradiction to her, because, it was almost like a part of her wanting to show off, right? Like, some of the things she did, you couldn't say, oh, that was hidden in her sleeve. I think they mentioned really briefly that she did not wear sleeves, none of her costumes. The other thing was, I think Bailey is an example of someone who's regular.
Yes.
Right? Because even they had to explain to him the magical elements of it towards the end of the book. But I think he's a perfect example of a regular person who's just kind of caught up in this circus.
And who chooses it.
Right.
But I think, to me also, as I was reading, how obsessed people became with the circus, where when they weren't there, they were thinking about it all the time, and it was like they felt more alive when they were there. It almost seemed like drug use. I don't have that experience, but people who have and who described it to me, like I had somebody, a friend who had done cocaine one time, and she's like, it was the best feeling I have ever had.
Right.
That's why I've never done it again, because, and so I was thinking, it seems like it's a drug to them, to certain people. Like, not everybody gets affected that way. It seems like some people could just go and have an awesome time and go home, but other people, it just, gets inside of them, and they can't. Those are the people who become the dreamers, right?
I thought that she did a really good job, too, of mixing. It was not just, there was a lot of romance, right? There's the romance, obviously, between Celia and Marcos, but there's the romance of the followers of the circus and the circus. But Poppet and Bailey, oh my God.
I love them.
I loved Poppet and Widget. They were so, especially, I wanted more of her brother. Because I thought, when he came to the circus, and Isabel read him, and she said, when you leave, you may want to go to the right. So I immediately knew, she's setting it up so that he finally gets to find Poppet.
Right.
And so when they had that first meeting, and he met the brother, and they were, going to show him around the circus and everything, it would have been so easy to make Widget be, an asshole towards Bailey.
Exactly.
But he was so, yeah, let's go get something to eat. Have you tried these? These are so good. Let's get the... And I was just everything about him, especially his conversation at the end, I just thought, when he was sipping the wine, and that's one part where I did go back to see the year, because I was trying to figure out, how old is he? He's sitting there sipping the wine, and everything about that conversation, he seemed so much older than he normally was, right? That was probably one of my favorite conversations in the book, is the one that ends the book, between Widget, am I saying his name right, Widget?
Yeah.
Widget and Alexander.
Yeah. I, too, thought, when they introduced Poppet and Bailey, I thought, just like you, I said, and this is where the part where the brother becomes a jealous, manipulator who goes and does everything he can to drive them apart. And it was so, like you said, it was such a treat to see Bailey call them my friends. He loves Widget, just in a different way, obviously, but he loves Widget just as much as he loves Poppet, and he considers them both very integral to his life. That was a beautiful surprise.
Let me see if I underlined it. Victoria just said that when they finally got to Widget at the end, she wanted to know more about him. And so did I.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the next book, maybe.
Is there going to be a next book?
I hope so.
You see, I would like to see her write again, but not that.
Yeah.
I think that story's done.
Yeah, I'm satisfied.
I've read a couple of other books where they've done sequels. I don't know if you've read If I Stay by Gail Forman. It's about a girl who's in a coma after a terrible car accident with her family, and it goes through this whole process of should she live or should she die. And it was a wonderful book, and I felt when I closed the end of it, I just felt, oh, that's a beautiful encapsulated story. And she wrote a sequel. And it's not that the sequel is bad, it's fine, but I feel like, to me, it's the equivalent of writing a sequel to West Side Story. Do I want to know what happened to Maria in that movie? I absolutely do, but I'm not supposed to.
It's like a bittersweet ending when you say you know what happens to the lovers of the circus. It was just kind of like, you can smell her perfume when you're in the cloud tent, and you can feel him in this. And I was just like, yeah, but I just kind of wanted them to, like, go get a flat in London and be like, and have lots of sex and, like, you know, just be like a normal couple.
But, you know, they did say at the end, and it's the whole theme of the book, right, what is real and what is not. And when they talk, when Alexander's talking, you know, they're imprisoned. How can you think that's a good thing? And Widget says, really? Because they're in love, they can create any world that they want, and they're going to be together forever. So
and everyone else that loved them or cared about them has a part of them too. Like, again, you can still smell her perfume, and so they kind of benefit from it as well. I did underline a couple of things that I just thought were either just really interesting or well written. But there's a part when the first time they're alone, when she goes to the dinner, and he steals her shawl. And then he gives her a tour of the house, and that tension, holy crap, where it was just like they couldn't look at each other, and the sparks between them, I was just like, that was really well done. But it says several times he catches her regarding him in a similar manner, and the moments when she holds his eyes with hers are sublime.
Aww.
Oh my God. Right. But okay, here's a question for you guys. Did you know that, remember, like, the whole thing through the book was, how is there a winner chosen? Like, who decides? When does this end? I think I got pretty early on that somebody would have to die, because they would have just said.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a canon of tragic romance.
And I knew that once the connection between them, you know, like the whole star-crossed lover thing happened, I figured that they would have to find a way to take themselves out. Like, that's the only way that they could be together. They couldn't, one of them would not be able to win, you know.
But weren't you scared, though? Because there were several times as the book was coming to a close that I was like, oh my God, one of them's going to sacrifice themselves for the other one, and then they'll never be together. So I applaud her.
I thought
for building that.
Here's why I had hope, because you know, the whole thing with the tree, that's the parallel to the Merlin legend, right, where he becomes a part of the tree. And I thought, okay, so even if one of them left, like, we already know from Celia's father that you just change into a different state, you know, like, you don't necessarily have to die forever. That maybe one of them would transform somehow. I didn't know it was going to be both of them, but I thought that might be what happens, is one of them might go into an altered state.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that moment, though, at the end, I cried. I'm not ashamed to admit at all that I bawled when she, and I mean, I never know on these things if we're supposed to spoil the ending for people. I assume if people are watching this, then they've read the book.
Yes, that's my assumption as well.
When she leapt into the fire, and he put his arms around her, and he wants to reject her because he wants her to save herself. But at the same time,
he knew that he did not have time to push her away, so he pulled her close instead.
I bawled.
Even with, I thought, with Chandras, I feel like I'm always screwing up his name, I was so sad that his brain was addled.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. When we first met him, I didn't know what to think of him. When you saw him throwing the knives, and we saw how hard he was on himself, where I think his review said that it was almost transcended or something, and he was like, almost, like,
right.
And that's how he got the idea to come up with the circus or whatever. But I thought, oh, I'm so glad she didn't leave him like this doddering fool in his, like, overflowing mansion with these blueprints that make no sense. I love the fact, I don't, it's the little things that Poppet went to him, and not only kind of cleared his brain, but stayed with him for hours and helped him put those things together and gave him a little kitten. And I was just like, oh, she took this story in directions I didn't expect, because it would have been so easy to just leave everybody.
Well, one of the things we said about 50 Shades, right, was that, besides the fact that it was utterly horrible, was that the peripheral characters had no purpose in the story. They were plunked there as caricatures, and we call them moves. You know, they were put there to get the two main characters moving. And you never feel like this with this book. Even characters that only get a small amount of time, it's so clear that she loved them and she wanted to give them purpose and wanted to give them personality, and that makes a book for me.
Well, I was going to say one of my favorite characters was Tsukiko. You know, like from the minute we meet her, she's so fascinating, and you're thinking, why are we paying so much attention to her?
And I didn't trust her.
I didn't either. Yeah, that's one of the things that I enjoyed about her is I didn't know what her motivations were, and when the reveal comes, you know, that she was the winner of the previous competition, you're like, what?
And not only that, but it was, sorry, I was talking to the people in the chat, that then, you know, I guess I also, too, didn't get how long this has been going on. Because she was like, he said, well, when did your competition end? And she said 83 years, so-and-so months, and so days ago. And I was like, holy crap. Like, yeah.
And even there was so much attention to detail. Even, like, her name, Tsukiko, and only people who speak Japanese are going to know it probably, but it means moonchild. Like, she had, in the beginning of one chapter, she had the characters for her name. And because I wasn't sure, you know, you could read it different ways, and I was like, of course, moonchild, that's perfect.
Oh, yeah, see, I didn't
know that either, but...
Yeah, like, she, you know what, she loves her readers, is what I thought. Because she cared so much about making this story, you know, full and rich and completely developed.
Okay, here's another line that another section that I highlighted, is when they discovered that, you know, he had threatened to leave the circus and, like, nothing happened to him. But when they really meant it, like when they really went to put it into motion, those rings that bonded them to the competition and kind of to each other, it started burning, and he, like, you know, he was overcome with pain. And I love the line where she says, it is likely meant to make us think we are not caged. Because it was like, you know, why would it just do it now? But when I threatened, you know, to leave before, like, nothing happened to me. It is likely meant to make us think we are not caged, Celia says. We cannot feel the bars unless we push against them. I was just like, she's such a good writer. That's such good dialogue. That was just an example of, I just had to underline that.
It was interesting to me that she quoted, you know, she was talking about Shakespeare off and on throughout the books as, you know, Celia quoting him and having all the books in her library, because I just thought, you are doing exactly what he's famous for, which is making words that were actually almost meant to be performed. You know what I mean? They jump right off the page.
Yeah. And, you know, I find that we get books, and this is, I guess I'm bringing up poor examples because they're not, I guess, very good books, but you find writers do that a lot, right, where they have a character and we learn that a character loves a writer, and that's supposed to it's supposed to shed some insight, right, onto their personality and why they are who they, like, for instance, in Twilight, she loved, oh God, I'm drawing a blank, somebody help me, the book, and I thought we were supposed to...
Oh, Wuthering Heights, was it?
Yes,
no.
Yes.
Okay.
It's supposed to make her intelligent, or even if it's gray, right? Like Anna loves...
She likes to read. She's
right.
smart.
And it didn't really work, but here it worked, right? Like there was a connection, and you could tell that the author not only knew her Shakespeare, right, but like she got that in the craft of writing, like you said, Barbara. Sometimes it works, and this was an example of when it really works.
Absolutely.
Well, and you got it, like, that she loved Shakespeare, obviously. It's not just somebody who had read it, somebody who loved it, loved the stories, and wanted to convey that. So I really enjoyed that. I have a really great question here about the morality of the circus in terms of the performers and the people who plan the circus don't know that they're pawns in it.
Right.
But they're giving this great gift to people, right?
Right.
So there's always, like, it seems like there's always, again, it's that battle of light and dark. There's, like, the dream can be a beautiful thing, or it can be a sinister thing. The circus is a magical, wonderful thing, but then there are people who are caught up in it and don't realize that they're caged.
Well, isn't that like, it reminded me in that way of, which it's not my favorite film of all time, but it was intriguing. It reminded me of Inception in that way. That whole thing of what is real, what is not, and what do you want to be real or not. And so those performers in the circus, you know, they were given whole, rich, rewarding, magical lives. Right. Does it even matter ultimately if it's not real for them because they're prisoners there? That question keeps coming back and forth, and it made me think of the end of Inception, which pissed so many people off, of what is his reality. I think the bigger question is, in the end, does it matter? If he's happy, does it matter?